Hello everyone, good evening. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. This is the Drug of the Day series where today we will be discussing briefly about the drug aspirin. So let's get started. Aspirin belongs to the class of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, and under that the subclass is non-selective COX inhibitors, and it belongs to the category of salicylates. Now, this is the classification of NSAIDs. As you can see here, it has non-selective COX inhibitors, preferential COX-2 inhibitors, selective COX-2 inhibitors, and analgesic antipyretics with poor anti-inflammatory action. And under non-selective COX inhibitors, we have 6 different categories, one of which is salicylates, and aspirin belongs to this category, the category of salicylates. Now, this is the structure of aspirin. Its chemical name is acetyl salicylic acid. So, aspirin is also known as acetyl salicylic acid or ASA. The IUPAC name is 2-acetoxybenzoic acid. So, this entire structure is of benzoic acid, and this group is the acetoxy group. So its IUPAC name is 2. This is first position. Sorry, this is second. This is third. So in the second position, we have the acetoxy group attached. So that's why it's 2-acetoxybenzoic acid. Its other names are acetyl salicylate and orthoacetyl salicylic acid, because this acetyl group is attached to this position, which is ortho position. So that's why it's orthoacetyl. That is, acetyl group is attached to the ortho position. So orthoacetyl salicylic acid. And the synthesis of aspirin is via esterification reaction. We'll see the synthesis later on. Now, the mechanism of action. So all the NSAIDs, their main mechanism of action is that they will block PG generation. PG is prostaglandin. So they will block prostaglandin generation. Now, how this is done? So prostaglandins, that is PG, prostacyclin, which is PGI2, and thromboxane, which is TXA2. They are produced from arachidonic acid via the enzyme cyclooxygenase. Okay, so prostaglandins and thromboxane A2 are produced from arachidonic acid via the enzyme cyclooxygenase, which exists in two isoforms. First is COX-1 and second is COX-2. COX-1 is constitutive, that is, it is already present in our body, and COX-2 is inducible, which means it is induced by inflammation. So the former, that is COX-1, which is constitutive, it is already present in our body, so it serves as the housekeeping function, while the later, that is COX-2, is normally present in minute quantities, but it is induced when there is an inflammation. So during that, there will be generation of prostaglandins locally, which will mediate the inflammatory changes. And all the NSAIDs, they basically inhibit COX-1 and COX-2 non-selectively. But nowadays, the newer NSAIDs, they act as selective COX-2 inhibitors. So we have both COX-1 and COX-2 inhibitors, which are non-selective in nature, and we also have selective COX-2 inhibitors. Now, aspirin, the most widely accepted mechanism of action of aspirin is that it will inhibit the biosynthesis of prostaglandin at the cyclooxygenase stage. So COX-1 and COX-2 won't be produced, and thus prostaglandin will also be blocked, and thus it will show its action. Then aspirin is the only NSAID that covalently, it will irreversibly and covalently bind to the cyclooxygenase, and it will cause acetylation of the serine residues of both COX-1 and COX-2. So it will cause acetylation of serine 530 of COX-1 and serine 516 of COX-2. There's no need of remembering the number, just remember that it will covalently and irreversibly cause acetylation of the serine residues of both COX-1 and COX-2. Also, aspirin is 10 to 100 times more potent against COX-1 than it is against COX-2. So even this is important. Then is the synthesis of aspirin. So aspirin, we know, is acetyl salicylic acid. So it is formed from salicylic acid, and salicylic acid is formed by coal-based synthesis. So in coal-based synthesis, we have sodium phenoxide, which is ONA group attached to benzene ring. This sodium phenoxide, in the presence of CO2 and at a temperature of 125 degrees Celsius and at 100 atmospheric pressure, it gets converted to sodium salicylate. So sodium phenoxide dioxide in the presence of carbon dioxide gets converted to sodium salicylate, which in the presence of hydrogen ion gets converted to salicylic acid. So salicylic acid is hydroxy group and the COOH group attached to benzene ring. Now this salicylic acid, when it is treated with acetic anhydride, that is salicylic acid undergoes esterification reaction with acetic anhydride, we get acetyl salicylic acid. So the anhydride group gets attached here to the salicylic acid and we get acetyl salicylic acid and acetic acid. So the synthesis is also very simple. Next is the SAR of aspirin. So the main active moiety of aspirin is the salicylate ion. Then substitution of the aromatic ring at fifth position. This is the fifth position. So substitution at this position will increase the anti-inflammatory activity. So any substitution at the fifth position will increase the anti-inflammatory activity. Next is substitution of halogen atoms on the aromatic ring will enhance the potency, which in turn will increase its toxicity. So substitution of halogen atom will increase both potency as well as toxicity. Now the main side effect of aspirin, which we'll see later on, that is mainly GI effects. They are mainly because of the carboxylic acid function that is present on the first position. So this carboxylic acid group is mainly responsible for all the GI effects, all the GI side effects of aspirin. So by reducing the acidity of this group, that is by converting it to an amide. So converting this salicylic acid to salicylamide, it will maintain the analgesic action, but it will eliminate all the anti-inflammatory property. Next is substitution on either the carboxyl group or the phenolic hydroxyl group affects the potency as well as toxicity. So any substitution on these two groups at first and second position should not be done, because it will affect the potency and toxicity. And lastly, placing the phenolic hydroxy group either on the meta position or on the para position to the carboxyl group will diminish the activity. So this phenolic hydroxy group is present on ortho position with respect to the carboxylic acid group. So displacement of this group to either the meta position or the para position will abolish the activity. So this phenolic hydroxy group should always be present ortho to the carboxyl group. Next is the pharmacological actions. So first one is analgesic action. So analgesic means relief of pain. So aspirin is very effective in relieving pain. What type of pain? It can relieve inflammatory pain, tissue injury related pain, connective tissue and integumental pain, but it is ineffective in severe visceral or ischemic pain. Next is antipyretic action. So antipyretic is reduction in body temperature. So aspirin will reset the hypothalamic thermostat and it will rapidly reduce fever by promoting heat loss, and this heat loss is done by sweating and cutaneous vasodilation. It will not decrease heat production. So this is very important. Aspirin will reduce fever not by decreasing heat production but by promoting heat loss, and this is done by sweating and cutaneous vasodilation. Next is its anti-inflammatory action. So its anti-inflammatory action is exerted at high doses, that is around 3 to 6 grams per day or 100 mg per kg per day. This is the anti-inflammatory dose, and all the signs of inflammation like pain and tenderness, swelling, vasodilation and leukocyte infiltration, they all are suppressed by this anti-inflammatory action. Also the anti-inflammatory action is due to COX inhibition and also because of quenching of the free radicals. They both contribute to the anti-inflammatory action. Next is respiration. So at inflammatory doses, respiration is stimulated, but when the dose is very high, that is at salicylate levels, it will cause respiratory depression and then death will occur because of respiratory failure. So at anti-inflammatory doses, respiration will be stimulated, but at very high doses, respiratory depression will occur and then death will occur because of respiratory failure. Next is metabolic effects. So its effect on the metabolic effects, there are many metabolic effects. First is the cellular metabolism is increased. That is, there will be increased heat production. Then there will be increased utilization of glucose, because of which blood glucose level will fall, especially in diabetics, and even liver glycogen will be depleted. Also, chronic use of large dose of aspirin will cause negative nitrogen balance, and by increased conversion of protein to carbohydrate. So there will be negative nitrogen balance, and also plasma free fatty acid and cholesterol levels will be reduced. Next is the CVS. So there is no direct action on CVS at therapeutic doses, but large doses will increase cardiac output, and this will cause vasodilation. And at very toxic doses, it will depress the vasomotor center, and BP may fall. So it will cause vasodilation and then lowering of blood pressure. Next is acid base and electrolyte balance. So this is very important. So anti-inflammatory dose, here again at anti-inflammatory doses, it will produce a significant change in the acid base and electrolyte balance. So initially compensated respiratory alkalosis will occur, and at higher dose uncompensated metabolic acidosis will occur. So this is very important. Initially alkalosis will occur, and at higher dose acidosis will occur. So how this happens is, first we'll look at alkalosis. So initially there will be respiratory stimulation. Okay, when aspirin is given in anti-inflammatory doses, initially respiratory stimulation will occur, which will mainly predominate, and this will wash out the CO2 despite its increased production, and this will lead to development of respiratory alkalosis, which is compensated by increased renal excretion of bicarbonate ions, and this will lead to a state of compensated respiratory alkalosis. And at very high dose, it will cause respiratory depression with CO2 retention. So since excess of CO2 retention is happening, it will cause respiratory respiratory acidosis. And to this, there will be also dissociation of salicylic acid and other metabolic acids like lactic acid, pyruvic acid, acetoacetic acid. So all this will combine to form a state of uncompensated metabolic acidosis. And during poisoning, that is aspirin poisoning, there will be dehydration. So dehydration will occur in poisoning because of increased water loss in urine, and there will be also increased sweating and hyperventilation. Next is urate excretion. So even this is very important. So when aspirin is given at this dose, that is less than 2 grams per day, urate retention will occur, and there will be antagonism of all the other uricosuric drugs. So uricosuric drugs are those drugs which are given for the treatment of gout. So if a patient of gout takes aspirin in a dose of less than 2 gram per day, then there will be urate retention. That is, uric acid won't get excreted from the body, and also antagonism of all other uricosuric drugs will happen. That's why aspirin is not prescribed to the patients of gout, although other NSAIDs are used, but aspirin is not given. Then in this dose, that is around 2 to 5 grams per day, there are variable effects. And if it is given in a dose of greater than 5 grams per day, there will be increased urate excretion. So that's why aspirin is not suitable to be used in chronic gout. Next is GIT. So aspirin, this is very important. Aspirin will irritate the gastric mucosa and will cause epigastric pain, distress, nausea, and vomiting. And it also stimulates the CTZ, that is, CTZ, and will cause vomiting. Then aspirin, the pKa of aspirin is 3.5. Because of this, it will remain unionized and diffusible in the gastric acid. We know that unionized drugs will be diffusible. So it will remain unionized and diffusible in the gastric acid juice. But once it enters the mucosal cells, where the pH is 7.1, it will become ionized and it won't be soluble, and it will become indiffusible. And this will cause ion trapping in the gastric mucosal cell, and this will enhance the gastric toxicity of aspirin. Also, aspirin particles, when they come in contact with the gastric mucosa, it will promote local back diffusion of acid, and this will lead to focal necrosis, ulcers, erosive gastritis, even congestion and microscopic hemorrhages, and even hematemesis can also occur. That's why soluble aspirin tablets are used. So soluble aspirin tablets are made up of calcium carbonate, citric acid, and other buffered preparation, and they are less liable to cause gastric irritation. Next is blood. So aspirin, even when it is given in small doses, it irreversibly inhibits thromboxane A2 synthesis by the platelets. So this is very important. It causes irreversible inhibition, that is suicide inhibition of thromboxane A2, which is synthesized by the platelets. And this will cause interference in platelet aggregation. And due to this, bleeding time will be prolonged to nearly twice the normal value. And since bleeding time is prolonged, long-term intake of large doses of aspirin will decrease the synthesis of clotting factors by the liver and also will predispose the patient to bleeding problems. And this can be prevented by prophylactically giving vitamin K therapy. Next is pharmacokinetics. So it has poor water solubility, and its poor water solubility is the limiting factor in its absorption. And to avoid this, microfining is done. So microfining the drug particles and inclusion of an alkali. So solubility of aspirin will be enhanced if alkali is incorporated. This will enhance absorption. So aspirin's absorption is increased by microfining it, that is by reducing its particle size, and also by incorporation of an alkali. Next is aspirin is rapidly deacetylated in the gut wall, liver, plasma, and other tissues to release salicylic acid. We know that aspirin is acetyl salicylic acid, that is acetyl group attached to the salicylic acid. And in the body, its metabolism is by deacetylation, that is removal of the acetyl group that is present at the second position. So deacetylation of aspirin will occur and in the body, and this will release salicylic acid, which is the major circulating and active form. So this means aspirin is a prodrug. Next is entry into brain is slow, but aspirin can freely cross the placenta. Then both aspirin and salicylic acid, which is its active form, they are conjugated in the liver with glycine to form salicylic acid. So aspirin and salicylic acid will combine with glycine to form salicylic acid, which is the major metabolism pathway, and they can also conjugate with glucuronic acid. Next is all the adverse effects. So nausea, vomiting, epigastric distress, increased occult blood loss and stool, these happens. Then the most important adverse effect of aspirin is gastric mucosal damage and peptic ulceration, which occurs because of iron trapping. Next is salicylism. Salicylism. So anti-inflammatory doses are given. When anti-inflammatory dose of aspirin is given, it will produce a syndrome called salicylism, which is and the symptoms are dizziness, tinnitus. Tinnitus is ringing in ears. Then vertigo. Then there will be reversible impairment of hearing and vision. Also mental confusion and hyperventilation and electrolyte imbalance. So this is what happens in salicylism. Next is Reye syndrome. This is very important. So when children having viral fevers, viral infection like varicella or influenza infection, in them when aspirin is given, then a rare form of hepatic encephalopathy occurs, and that is known as Reye syndrome. That's why aspirin is never given to children, because there is a fear of development of Reye syndrome. And last is acute salicylate poisoning. So acute salicylate poisoning is very common in children, and its fatal dose for adults is 15 to 30 grams. So in acute salicylate poisoning, what happens is there is vomiting and dehydration, electrolyte imbalance, there is hypoglycemia, even hemorrhages occur, hallucination, convulsions, coma, and death. Death is mainly because of respiratory failure and cardiovascular collapse. So treatment of acute salicylate poisoning is very important, and the treatment is symptomatic and supportive. So most important is external cooling, then IV fluids are given, gastric lavage is done to remove the unabsorbed drug. Also alkaline diuresis or hemodialysis can be done to remove the absorbed drug. Also blood transfusion and vitamin K should be given if bleeding occurs. So out of this, salicylism is important and Reye syndrome is very important. Next is the uses of aspirin. So first one is obviously as analgesic. It can be used for headaches, including mild migraine, also for backache, myalgia. Myalgia is again pain. Then pain in muscles, then joint pain, then pulled muscle pain, toothache, neuralgias, dysmenorias. It can be used for relieving pain for in any of these conditions. Next is as an antipyretic also, it can be given. It is very effective in fever of any origin. But paracetamol, which is being safe safer is generally preferred, especially in children. So aspirin is not given in children because of risk of development of Ray's syndrome. In them, paracetamol is safe. Paracetamol is given in them. Next is osteoarthritis. So this in osteoarthritis, there is again stiffness and pain in the joints. So here also it affords symptomatic relief, and it may be used as an as and when required drug. But paracetamol again is the first choice analgesic for most of the cases of osteoarthritis. Next is patent ductus arteriosus. So patent ductus arteriosus or PDA is an opening that is present between two blood vessels leading from the heart during birth. So ductus arteriosus is kept patent. Patent means it is kept open because of presence of PGE2 and COX2 during birth. But at the time of delivery, there is one mechanism that switches off the synthesis of PGE2 and COX2, and the ductus closes. But when this fails to occur, that is when ductus arteriosus fails to close, then we can give NSAIDs. So small dose of indomethacin or aspirin can be given to bring about the closure in most of the cases. Next is in rheumatoid arthritis. So aspirin is effective in most of the cases of rheumatoid arthritis. It produces relief of pain, swelling, and morning stiffness, but progression of the disease is not affected. Okay, it only relieves the pain. And since large doses of aspirin are poorly tolerated for long periods, it is rarely used now. Other NSAIDs are preferred. Next is in acute rheumatic fever. So aspirin is the first drug to be used in all of the cases of acute rheumatic fever. Then next is in pregnancy induced hypertension and preeclampsia. Preeclampsia is again very high blood pressure. So if there is imbalance between thromboxane A2 and PGI2, this is the main cause that leads to development of pregnancy induced hypertension and preeclampsia. Here again, aspirin can be given in a dose of around 80 to 100 mg per day, and then this will cause treatment of this by selectively suppressing thromboxane A2 production. Next is for familial colonic polypsis. So aspirin and other NSAIDs, they suppress polyp formation and afford symptomatic relief in this disorder. Next is in prevention of colon cancer. So incidence of colon cancer among regular aspirin users is also lower. Next is for post myocardial infractions and for post-stroke patients. So we know that aspirin inhibits thromboxane A2 synthesis. So by inhibiting platelet aggregation, aspirin lowers the incidence of reinfraction. That's why aspirin, when it is given in a dose of 60 to 100 mg per day, it reduces the incidence of myocardial infraction, in that is MI. That's why it is now routinely prescribed to post-infarct patients. Also, new onset angina and sudden worsening of angina is associated with high infraction rate. That's why in these patients also, that is in angina patients also, aspirin can be given. And aspirin also reduces transient ischemic attack, and it lowers the incidence of strokes. So it can be given to patients of cardiovascular diseases. Now, this is the question that came in GPAT 2012. The question was low dose aspirin that acts as an antiplatelet aggregating agent. It does this by which of the following mechanisms? And the options were: first is it acts as a suicide substrate for COX-1, a suicide substrate for COX-1 enzyme that is present in the platelets. It acts as a transition state analog for COX-2 enzyme that is present in the platelets, or it acts as a reversible inhibitor of lipooxygenase, or it acts as an affinity label of oxidoreductase that is present in the platelets. So we know that the correct answer here is option A, that is it acts as a suicide inhibitor and it inhibits the synthesis of COX-1 enzyme that is present in the platelets. Okay, so yeah, thank you. I hope you liked this video, and please share it with all of your friends who are preparing for GPAT and NIPER. Give it a big thumbs up and also subscribe to our channel. Also, we have a free WhatsApp group where we daily post MCQs related to GPAT and NIPER. So if you want to join the group, drop a text on these two numbers that are given here at the end of the slide and we'll do the needful. Thank you.